Burma. 2 years after Pearl Harbor, General Joseph Stilwell opened his long-delayed campaign for a ground supply route to China. With a handful of Americans and American-equipped Chinese divisions, he was advancing to meet the Japanese Imperial Army and drive them out of Burma. Stillwell had molded the once pulpy-massed top fighters, able to meet the Japanese on equal terms. But this Allied penetration, named Operation Saucy, was unusually difficult. The men had to fight the Japs and the disease-infested jungle in order to stay alive.
As a transport pilot, my job was to fly help to Vinegar Joe's army. He was entirely dependent on our 10th Air Force for ammo and medicine, clothing and food. Stillwell's men marked their drop zones as they inched steadily closer to Jap positions. The progress of an army depended on a co-pilot's signal. General Stratemeyer had warned the Pentagon. The only way we can supply any force that advances into Burma is by airdrop. That's why when Stillwell started this offensive southward from Lido, he had air supply for his advancing troops. Our supply pushers developed bomb sight precision. For the past year, split-second timing had meant survival to lonely air warning outposts perched on jungle-covered ridges in the Naga Hills. Air supply and the successful teamwork of the Eastern Air Command now made it possible for the Burma campaign to drive ahead.
But in the jungle, the mission that the Joint Chiefs of Staff had given General Stillwell was one of the toughest in the war. He had a most difficult physical problem of great distances, almost impassable terrain. Cutting their own trail, Stillwell's army stumbled along at barely a mile an hour. The Chinese jockeyed for a frontal position, flanked by other Allied forces. It was a two-pronged drive to split the Jap wedge and reopen the Burma Road. The advance by the Chinese army into the Hukung Valley was the most ambitious campaign yet staged on the end of a thin airborne supply line. With amazing vigor, Stillwell carried on. Wounded men, the enemy, and the jungle were his obstacles. Quick evacuation of casualties could hasten the campaign, cut it down to months instead of years. But how can you get a wounded man out of the jungle fast?
In the CBI, a plane we called a Sky Jeep was the answer. It was both a light transport and an ambulance. Able to operate from temporary airfields, we achieved a high degree of mobility and secrecy. In 1 month, 10 sergeant-driven Sky Jeeps carried out more than 700 casualties. With one of Stillwell's wounded soldiers aboard, the last chance got ready for takeoff. The Burma campaign made full use of air power, from transports and bombers to an armada of Sky Jeeps. Upwards of 100,000 men were constantly supplied and evacuated by air. Eventually, the Allies were able to drive the enemy out of Burma.
Down at Allied bases south of New Guinea's Owen Stanley Mountains, another army of men and planes prepared for the first Allied paratroop drop in the Pacific. It was designed to cut off a large force of Japs at Nadzab in northeast New Guinea. Early in the morning of 5 September, 1,700 sky jumpers in full battle array climbed aboard a fleet of General George Kenny's 5th Air Force transport. At 08:25 hours, the first C-47s rolled down the runway. Within 15 minutes, 3 flights totaling 79 planes took off. In all, 302 aircraft slid into place and, like a mighty procession, paraded toward Nadsat. The pilots gradually dropped from altitudes of 3,500 feet down to 500 feet. So far, no trace of the enemy, but no chances were being taken. A squadron of low-flying attack bombers laid columns of smoke on the floor of the Nadsat Valley. Once over the target area, the transports formed into 3 columns, each with 32 planes. The 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment and a battalion of Australians tumbled out to make their first drop, and with success. Nadsat, the Japs' back door, was left open. With Allied forces firmly installed in northeast New Guinea and the Solomons, General MacArthur and Admiral Halsey could now threaten Rabaul, the enemy's main supply center in this critical area.
For 3 days in a row, we were alerted for a strong, low-level attack to knock out Rabaul on New Britain Island. At forward staging bases in New Guinea, our B-25s waited for weather as we got ready. We were going to depend on our gunners to neutralize enemy planes in Akak in order for the rest of us to smash the airdromes around Rabaul and then destroy the concentration of military shipping in Simpson Harbor.
Ever since January 1942, units of the 5th Air Force had continually blasted Rabaul. Today, November 2nd, 1943, the briefing officer announced that the 8th Photo Squad flying recon over Simpson Harbor had seen 7 destroyers and 20 merchant vessels. At the airdromes, they had counted 237 planes. This sounded like a rough mission. At the fighter pilot briefings, P-38 boys were given details of the plan that required perfect coordination between bomber and fighter elements. Surprise and timing were the mainsprings of the battle plan that the successful air campaigner General Kenny now put in motion. Briefings over, 5 squadrons of Mitchells, a force of 80 medium bombers, were boarded and revved up. Shortly after 1000 hours, the tower gave them the go-ahead, and the bombers got underway. Then the fighters got ready. From 6 squadrons of Lightnings, 2 squadrons had orders to sweep Simpson Harbor, 4 to blanket the land battery. In all, 80 Lightnings scrambled off. Our bombers held their formations as we headed toward Rabaul. Leader of our shipping strike forces was a veteran of 80 strafing missions, 25-year-old attack group commander Major John Hennebrey. Once over the Solomon Sea, the Kenny plan went into high gear. As we scanned the skies, we spotted what we were looking for: enemy aircraft. Our Lightning swept in ahead of the bombers to clear the area. When 2 Zeros challenged Captain Ralph Bills and his wingman, he opened up. First, Bills didn't connect, so he got his .38 on the Jap's tail, and the battle turned into a chase.
attack, our lightnings ran into more than 60 interceptors. The P-38 escort, led by Major Gerald Johnson and Captain Richard Vaughn, blew interference with the anti-aircraft neutralizing forces. They attacked swiftly and with a double intent of covering the B-25s and destroying the enemy. Our surprise visit gave the Jap pilots at Guinea Aerodrome short warning before the speedy P-38s peeled off and dropped their bombs. Next, we dove in, parked on hard stands and revetments. 3 minutes later, 4 bombardment squadrons approached the target area. Assigned to neutralize shore anti-aircraft positions, the B-25s peeled off. Parachute fragmentation bombs, because of their delayed explosions, permitted us to get down low and blast the enemy out of their hiding places. It was this complete neutralization which finally enabled our striking forces to make dangerous mast-high runs over Simpson Harbor. At Rabaul this day, we bombed 24 enemy ships. We strafed 17. Our bombers destroyed 52 enemy aircraft. Our fighters claimed 42 shot out of the sky. The cost, 45 American flyers, 17 American planes. In the space of 12 minutes, a formidable Japanese sea and air armada was attacked and decisively defeated.
After 2 years of war, the Japanese strategic plan had been fatally upset. But the Allies knew the enemy was not yet destroyed. Our armies and navy still controlled conquered territory. General Arnold told the world, "There are many roads that lead right to Tokyo, and we're not going to neglect any of them." Relentlessly, the Allied attack had to continue, spearheaded by the striking power of the United States Air Force.